This video is going to be a beginner's guide to slide guitar. I'm going to give just a brief overview of some of the different aspects of slide guitar. This isn't for like lap steel or pedal steel. This is just for slide guitar on like a traditional guitar. So I'm going to go over the types of slides that there are that you could use. I'm going to go over which finger on your slide hand to use, slide hand technique, your picking hand technique, and also an overview of the tunings that you could use. Okay, so there's a bunch of different types of slides in terms of the materials and the shapes and thicknesses. I have experience with some metallic ones and glass. I know there's also ceramic, I believe. I don't have experience with those yet. They're all gonna sound slightly different. I find mostly though, I try to find the ones that are the most comfortable for me and then try to get them to sound better. But I do find like the thicker walled glass slides are probably my favorite ones in terms of the sound. But I've been using this metallic one. It's called Mag Slide, so it's actually it's metal, but it's a very light metal. It's magnesium, so it's just on my hand. It just feels better when you're playing a lot. Having like the really thick walled like glass, which I used to use for years, just got like to be too much, especially when trying to do more like chording with slide and stuff, and like it just got too much to kind of always have that thing on my hand. So I'm starting to like the lighter ones. So it's all going to be up to you. Might need to try a couple different ones to see what you like, and over the years you'll definitely experiment with other ones. I'm not affiliated with any of these brands or anything. This is something that's going to be just personal preference. I will say though that sometimes if you get one that's too light in weight or too thin, sometimes especially on like an acoustic guitar or something with a higher gauge strings, you might have difficulty with that. So just keep that in mind. You might need to, there might be like a threshold where you don't want to have something that's too thin to where it becomes difficult to play. So you want to try to find the balance of, you know, the sound that you like that they make versus just the comfort and the general like functionality of it. So it's going to be, you know, up to you to kind of, as you go through your journey, you'll figure out which one you like and which ones you don't. Which finger do you put this slide on? This one again is going to be more of a personal preference thing. You'll have to just play around with things and see what works for you. But once you get to a certain point, just pick one and commit to it. You'll probably see most people either using their ring finger with the slide or their pinky. However, I believe Joe Walsh, I'm sure there's other people too, but I think Joe Walsh used his middle finger for it. I feel like I remember seeing that, but I'm not 100% sure. In general though, you just don't want to use your index finger, and there's going to be a reason for that. When I get into the more technique stuff, you'll see why. So in general, either your middle, your ring, or your pinky are going to be the ones you want to use. The ring finger I just chose because I was really into Derek Trucks and that was what he was using, so I just kind of mimicked that. But I know there's a lot of people, especially I'm seeing more and more nowadays as well, using their pinky, and it does give you more of like, because you have your kind of three main fingers to do much more of the like non-slide stuff. I figured out how to use my pinky, middle, and index to do most of the chording that I would ever need. So you can make it work. It's just going to be you picking something and just sticking to it. You don't want to, you know, keep flip-flopping and like changing that after a certain point, because it's going to be hard to really develop your style and your technique and get comfortable if you keep switching around. So early on it's good to maybe just see, you know, which one seems like it's the best fit for you, but at a certain point just commit to it and you'll figure it out. You'll figure out what works for you and how to make whichever choice you make. You'll figure out how to make it work for you, and you'll get really good at that way. So I'm going to go over brief overview of your slide hand technique. So this is going to be the technique for the hand that you have your slide on and that you're going to be using to slide up and down the strings. What you're going to be doing when you have the slide on your hand, you're going to just lay it down over the strings. In general, you want to have like as light a touch as possible. You want to actually be getting the string to, you know, make a clean note. But you don't want to be too light to where just gonna have the open string, or it's gonna make that really awful buzzing noise, which you don't want. But if you press too hard, it's gonna actually just fret the note. So the string's actually gonna touch the metal, which we don't want either. So we wanna be able to have a smooth, slide, not, you can kind of hear the frets in there. You don't wanna have that either. So this is gonna be just over time developing that touch and the feel for it. And I find it's best to keep in, you don't want to have the slide like rotated. You want to keep it as parallel or in line with the frets as possible. And then with your other fingers that are what I would call like behind the slide, so I'm using my ring finger, so your index and your middle finger, the ones that are towards the headstock of the guitar, you just kind of gently lay those down next to the slide. So you want to be just gently over the strings, but you don't want to press down fretting the notes. You just want to just have it to sort of cut off the strings and make that percussive sound, and then you'll have the slide down in front of it. And what this is going to help, it's going to help with the muting. You're going to see with slide there's a lot of finesse involved with making sure that only the string that you want to be playing is making a sound and the other ones are just cut off. So once you pluck a string, it's going to be going until you stop it. And so having your fingers down behind it will help to kind of cut off some of the overtones and things. But you'll see the majority of it is done with your picking hand, but we'll get into that. You want to just, you can have your thumb anchoring, just kind of gently anchoring to the back of the neck. You don't want to press too hard, because we do want to be able to slide. If you're pressing too hard, it's gonna make it harder to slide. And again, this is all just kind of playing around till you figure out what works for you, but in general this is what has worked for me, and I think it's a pretty standard way to do it. You have your slide down roughly as parallel to the frets as possible, so in line with them as possible, not rotated. You got your other fingers just gently resting down, so they're muting any overtones and things behind the string. And then your thumb gently resting on the back of the neck, and then you'll be good to go. Your picking technique and what's called your muting technique is going to be the most important thing when learning slide. I'm just going to kind of do a brief rundown of this. I have a much more detailed picking and muting technique video if you want to check that out. It's going to go much more in depth into that, but I'm going to do just a brief overview here. When we're using the slide to choose the notes instead of fretting the notes, you lose a lot of the control that we typically have with this hand. We have to compensate with our picking hand for that in order to make sure things sound cleaner and we're not, playing a bunch of random notes and strings. We only want the ones that we want to be playing actually making the sound. And the slide is going to make that very difficult, but we can use our free fingers to what's called mute the strings. So typically what I've found that works is using the side of my thumb to gently lay down on the strings. So that's going to do the majority of the work. And then I'll use my index finger and middle finger to, it's either going to be covering up a string or picking the string and vice versa. That's very general though. Like you'll find as you go along, you're kind of just using the thing that's closest to help with. Sometimes you'll even use your ring or your pinky, or who knows, like sometimes it just like it kind of just happens automatically. So you'll have to probably think about it a lot more early on, but once you start to get more comfortable, you'll see it'll kind of just happen automatically, and that's when you've got it. But it does take a little bit of work. In general, like if I just want to pick the second string here, I have my thumb resting on the 6th, 5th, and 4th string, and then my middle finger is actually covering up that first string, and then I'm picking with my index finger on the second string. And then sometimes if when I play the first string, my thumb will just come down and mute everything but the first string. Definitely check out that video. I go much more in depth with that, and I have an exercise that'll help you to work on that as well. Last thing I'm going to go over is the general tunings that are typically used for slide. It's typically taught, and I think most people will put their guitar in what's called an open tuning. So you're going to tune the open strings to a specific chord. They have what's called like open G tuning, open E, open D, open A, and so the letter just corresponds to the chord that you've tuned your guitar to. So open G, as an example, you'll tune the strings so that when you just strum the open strings, it'll be a G major chord. A lot of people play slide with that so that things line up a little bit easier in a given fret to a specific chord. You have to, do a little bit less work with the muting and stuff, and it does sound pretty cool for blues and rock music. You don't have to do it that way. I generally, even though it's probably not thought about a lot and it's, not really preferred for people, I recommend just keeping your guitar in your typical standard tuning at least some of the time when you're working on slide guitar. Standard tuning things don't line up as well, and what that means for slide is you're going to have to really focus in on your muting and picking technique to make sure that you're really on top of that and on top of the strings that the ones you want to be playing versus not. And I think that only will benefit you regardless of whether you plan to stay in standard or go back to open tuning. It's going to just really develop that, and I think it'll do it a lot quicker and a lot more thoroughly when you're in standard tuning. So I recommend doing that, but you don't have to do that at all. And I think that's definitely something, if you have no interest in playing standard, don't worry about that till you get to maybe like an intermediate phase with it. When you're a pure beginner, you can stick to the open tunings, but it's just something to keep in mind. Those are pretty much the main aspects of learning slide on a traditional guitar. There's definitely other things in terms of like you could set up your guitar in a specific way for slide with the action, or using thicker strings, or using something like a resonator guitar. I try to just keep it as brief as possible to not make this video super long. Again, I have that picking and muting video on my channel, and I have a bunch of lessons on there dedicated for slide, as well as non-slide playing, just general tips, and also a lot of shorts as well. So definitely check out the shorts.